Hello, welcome back to part 3 of the video series looking at the European Car of the Year and finding out just how good the judges were at picking the winners and sometimes finding the losers. If you missed part 1, there's a link above or in the description. Anyway, on to the 1980s. When I left you, we were talking about the Chrysler Horizon, a car that was quickly renamed the Talbot Horizon when Chrysler sold their European operation to PSA. The 1980 winner is another car that had a lot of potential, but never fully realized it, the Lancia Delta. Like the Horizon, it was shooting for the mass market 5-door hatchback market, and like the Horizon, customers preferred more reliable and less rusty cars from manufacturers like Opel, Ford and Volkswagen. The Delta would find its niche in the late 1980s as maybe the ultimate hot hatch, but despite its accolade of European Car of the Year in 1980, sales, at least initially, were sluggish. 5-door hatchbacks were very popular in the 1980s, but people wanted a 5-door hatchback that was stylish, it would start in the morning and could hold its residual value. That car for many in the 1980s was the 1981 winner, the third generation Ford Escort. It was solid and well put together, something that I found out when I survived a 70-mile-an-hour crash on the M6 in one, escaping without a scratch. This car built on the success of the first 2 generations of Escort and was a good choice for the top spot in 1981. We all know the Ford Escort, but the 1982 winner, the Renault 9, didn't do so well. The 9 was the saloon version that launched in 1981, whereas the hatchback, the 11, launched 2 years later. Designed by Robert Aupron, a refugee from Citroën after its implosion and someone who designed 2 previous winners, the Citroën GS and CX, the Renault 9 was much more bland with a simple 3-box shape that was equally boring on cars like the Austin Montego. Renaults always sold well in nationalistic France before the trade borders fell in 1992, but by the late 1980s, Renault itself had seen the 1980s as an exercise in boring design, almost like they were copying the bland styling of Peugeot cars from the 1970s. Peugeot would soon change their game, but it would take a decade for Renault to change. Audi's small car, the 80, won the award in the 1970s, and now it's the turn of the larger car, the Audi 100. The third generation car was quite special, carrying over its odd but surprisingly effective 5-cylinder engine from the previous car and focusing on weight and drag reduction. The car was lighter than the old car despite more features and featured a class-leading drag factor of just 0.3. When combined with Audi's new Quattro 4-wheel drive system, this made it quite a car if you could get used to the new look taller boot that was there to reduce drag and of course to increase the boot space. Vorsprung durch Technik, Audi's tagline, would go on to be heard everywhere in the 1980s, and the third generation 100 propelled Audi from also-rans to true competitors to BMW and Mercedes. Fiat had last won the European Car of the Year award in 1972 with the 127, and its successor, the Uno, deserved to win 12 years later in 1984. Fiat had boiled the Super Mini down to its essential elements that people wanted from a car. This wasn't a stripped-back vehicle though, it had what a family needed to travel in comfort, but it offered all of this for a great price in a great package. It's maybe not a surprise that the Uno is the highest selling Fiat of all time with 9 million sold. The Opel Kadett Vauxhall Astra should maybe have won in 1980. Like the Uno, this was a good value, reliable and attractive car that sold well. The Car of the Year committee corrected that oversight by giving the award to the next generation model in 1985. This took the previous car and updated it with a look for the late 1980s. Like the previous car, this wasn't really anything to do with Vauxhall, they just rebadged it. This was a German Opel and it was parent General Motors at their finest. The company would never quite again produce a car that provided the knockout punch that this car did, and so the Astra Kadett in 1985 was a worthy winner. In 1983, Audi's 100 had only just beaten the new Ford Sierra to the top spot. Those strange looks had maybe put judges off, but by 1986 they got used to them, so it's maybe not a surprise that Ford won with a third generation Granada, known as the Scorpio, on the continent. Ford had produced a refined and competent car, but they made one big mistake. It was a hatchback. Customers didn't like this, and it took Ford a few years to make a saloon, but that was too little too late. Customers didn't want a large luxury hatchback, and sales never took off. So it's a bit of a surprise that the 1987 winner, the Opel Omega or Vauxhall Carlton, didn't do better. It was a saloon, check. It was from Opel, who, like Ford, knew how to make great value cars that were easy to service and didn't go wrong. So given that the Omega Carlton had everything going for it, why didn't Vauxhall and Opel sell more of them? It was all to do with the rise of the German Big Three and brand snobbery. Audi had come in second place with the new 80 and BMW in third place with the new 7 Series. In the late 1980s, it was the badge that mattered, especially for large luxury cars, and the mass car makers didn't immediately have a response. The Peugeot 405 won the 1988 Car of the Year award by the highest ever margin, almost double the amount of the second place car. The 405 shared the platform of the Citroën BX that was doing quite well on its own. The 405 dropped the BX's hydropneumatic suspension, but it showed that conventional suspension was just as good and less complex. A memorable TV ad campaign led to a lot of sales. Peugeot should maybe have won for the quite excellent 205 in 1984, but the 405, still produced today in Azerbaijan, was another worthy winner. And so to the end of the 1980s, the new Vauxhall Cavalier Opel Vectra got the attention of the judges, but it didn't win. The winner was the Fiat Tipo, Italy's newest answer to the Volkswagen Golf, a car that, let's remember, hasn't won the award but has been dominating European car sales by this point. The Tipo's innovative styling from the Idea Institute produced a taller car that had the same passenger room as the Ford Sierra in a car the same size as the Ford Escort. The Tipo was where cars were headed in the 1990s, and it did well with almost 2 million sold over 7 years. Well, that's about it for the 1980s. You know the drill now. Click the link on the right for the 90s video, or if you're watching this on the day the video is released, then wait a day and you should see it in your feed. And I'll see you tomorrow.